There's a... Thank you. That's So I'm glad Nikki said that, because I actually want to say that one of the things that brought me here was Nikki. We were on a playground somewhere about 2 months ago, and she said, you should give a talk at Green College. I said, oh, Nikki, I don't have time. I'm not going to... They required me to write a page to say what I'm going to talk about. And Nikki roundly ridiculed me, and so here we are. One of the things which, in addition to Nikki's ridicule... Yeah, we can take that out. I'm not using that. In addition to Nikki's ridicule, which brought me here, was the title of this whole seminar, the Beyond Worlds Between Disciplines. It's pretty much a summary of my life since Green College. I mean, that's like, not intentionally, but that just is how it sort of worked out. So, and that was pretty much as far as I had gotten until about 3 days ago. I figured I would do a reading and I would talk, but I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about. And I was talking to my daughter, my oldest daughter, right there, who... And I said, Ellie, I'm talking, and because she has a PD day today and wanted to come, I'm like, but I don't know what I'm saying. It might not really be appropriate. She's like, well, why don't you talk about how you should follow your dreams? And that will be the most, that will lead to happiness for people. I think people could really hear that lesson. And that's certainly one lesson. The other lesson would be don't follow your dreams. Don't. But, usually Ellie's right when we have these discussions. So I'm guessing that's correct. Having said all that, Richard, I'm a little confused about how much time I should spend talking. Can you just give me 20 minutes? Okay. So I'm going to spend about 5 minutes talking about sort of, what I was doing at Green College, this being Green College, how Green College sort of shaped my trajectory, both academically and creatively. And then I'm going to read a little bit from my novel and a little bit from a short story for adults, just because you are mostly not my target audience, to be absolutely honest. You're not 12. I mean, that's all I'm saying. I'm not, I also want to thank, I see a lot of people I haven't seen for a while. My former professor, Tom Hudden, great to see Tom, and former students, and former dinner companions, that's all here. All right, so I was at Green College from 97 to 99, more or less, and I was finishing up my master's degree, and I thought, I was at, a dinner, one of the many dinners you have, and I was looking around, and I happened to be sitting with a lot of the writers, and I was like, I've wanted to write for a long time, and they're writing, I should write. So it was literally that simple of a sort of cognitive leap that I'd always thought of writing being something sort of, other people did, and I was like, well, they're doing it. They seem like nice, reasonable people. I, at this point, had known them for years, so I decided to take some time off from what was then my job at this was, I guess, after I had finished at UBC and was working at the City of Vancouver Planning Department. So I started writing, and then I took some time off and wrote more. And then I decided to go back to school and got my PhD in planning, which was my academic sort of trajectory at the time. But before I did that, a number of people at Green College were really influential in encouraging me to keep going. Maddie Tien, who's reading tomorrow, was there at the time. Great author who was very encouraging, read my writing, critiqued, and Mark was actually, I remember talking to Mark as well, and getting a lot of encouragement from him too. So that was a part of, as I moved forward, why I was doing writing and also doing my PhD in something, not writing at all. So it was interesting, sort of trying to combine these worlds and not really combining them at all, as it turned out. So what I did in the end is, I wrote a PhD, and at the same time, I wrote a YA novel about, magic in suburban high schools. And that, to me, seemed like a pretty satisfying exchange. Like, rather than doing, so I guess that's not the between disciplines, but beyond disciplines part. At the same time, I was writing a very interdisciplinary PhD, so I think that as well seems like a sort of poster child for I'm going to get this wrong, beyond disciplines, between worlds. Is that right? Between worlds, beyond disciplines. Anyway, and it's worked for me. I mean, fast forwarding a decade, more than a decade, Nikki, how many years? 16 years. I've ended up teaching statistics and business math, so teaching about how one sort of gets to know the world. I also occasionally teach more general research methods classes, but it's all about, what's really there. That's why, hence the name of my particular talk, which I can't remember offhand, but it's something to do with truths and lies, Because, you know, that's really my job as a teacher, is teaching about, well, how do you know the world? But, you know, how do you, as Heather was saying, looking at not what you think you know, but at what you actually know, and different ways of knowing across the epistemological, ontological worlds. And then I make up stories. That's the other part of my job, which is I just make up stories which seem fun to me. So it's happy, but it's very much been sort of carving out a little between-world bubble for myself that is not at all present in the world. You know, it's like not something that is stable, except insofar as it's been sort of stable for about 5 years now. But it's great. So anyway, I don't have a lot more to say about that before reading from this book. This book is called The Path of Names. It's a middle grade novel, so that's for about ages 10 to 13. Usually when I do this, I'm reading to middle grade audience. I would start by saying something like, have any of you ever gone to summer camp? Did anything scary happen at summer camp? But Ellie, do you want to say something? Do you want to answer that?
I didn't want to go to summer camp.
So Ellie didn't want to go to summer camp, just like the main character of this book. And it turned out like you liked it, right? All right. Thank goodness. We'll talk about this later. So, chapter 1, Dahlia. Dahlia stared out the car window and thought about Harry Houdini. She knew at least 8 ways that Houdini had escaped from a straitjacket, including 2 escapes that he had performed underwater. None of them did her any good. Her parents didn't have her in a straitjacket. In fact, although her father had easy access to straitjackets at the hospital where he worked, he refused to bring one home. Which was, you know, annoying, as it was impossible to learn to escape from a straitjacket without having one to practice with. 3 weeks, she thought again. 3 weeks at the stupid camp. She'd probably be the only person there who liked math or magic tricks. Even the ride up was ugly, with a little highway taking them past a seemingly endless strip mall. Costco, Best Buy, McDonald's, Acme Fresh Market. Dahlia, her mother said, will you stop sighing like that? It's not the end of the world. Oh, I'm sorry, were my sighs bothering you, Dahlia said. Here's an idea. Why don't you make me go to summer camp so I won't be around to bother you so much with my awful sighs? Oh, wait, I forgot. That's exactly what you're doing. No one's making you do anything, her father said. You freely entered into a deal with us. To wit, you go to Camp Arava for 3 weeks now, and we let you go to your magic camp in August, where I presume you'll get even better at such important life skills as drawing pigeons from hats and avoiding the sun. Dahlia shook her head. It was blackmail, plain and simple. They knew how badly she wanted to go to magic camp. If you wanted to get rid of me for July, why couldn't you just send me back to math camp? Her mother kept her gaze trained out the window. Nobody wants to get rid of you. We just think it won't hurt you to meet some Jewish kids. Plus, it's a way for you and your brother to spend time together, her father put in, glancing in the rearview mirror and turning right onto a smaller road. The strip malls receded behind them, giving way to fields of green, waist-high corn. Who says I want to spend time with Tom? It had been years since Dahlia would have been excited to spend 3 weeks with her brother. Years of Tom teasing her every time she got 100% on a math test or tried to show him a new trick shuffle. Neither of her parents bothered responding. Dahlia dug a quarter out of her pocket and started rolling it over her knuckles. It was an important move in coin magic, and she still wasn't very good at it. After a few minutes, her father turned left onto a gravel road. Dahlia's stomach tightened. They were almost there. Sure enough, a moment later, they drove across a bridge spanning the little creek that skirted the camp. She remembered throwing rocks off the bridge 3 years ago, the last time she had let her parents drag her up for visiting day. After that, she had flat out refused to go anywhere near the camp. Until now. She was 13 years old now. 13 was too old to be afraid of whatever it was that had happened, which was nothing. There was no way lightning had really struck her. It had been a perfectly sunny day, and Tom had been like 2 feet away, close enough to make fun of her for whatever look he'd seen on her face. And Tom hadn't felt anything, so it couldn't really have been lightning. Still, thinking about it, especially now that she was back at the camp, was making her skin prickle. Dahlia pushed the memory away and looked around. When she and her parents had come up for visiting day, they'd always left the car in the small lot next to the creek. Today, though, they drove past the parking lot and straight up the gravel road into the center of the camp. Each cabin had a handful of cars parked in front of it, with parents and campers moving in, carrying trunks, duffel bags, audio speakers, and whatever else the kids had brought to camp. Her father maneuvered their minivan around the periphery of the central sports field, pulling up in front of a double cabin next to the bathrooms. He turned off the engine and said, "Here we are, Streif Grafit. Sharif means bunk. You're going to learn a lot of Hebrew without even knowing it. And you say magic camp is useless, Dahlia said. She glanced at the cabin, automatically checking that it had a lightning rod. She's a little quirky, our character here. Two girls about her age were talking in the grassy area behind, next to the cabin. They were both wearing tank tops and skinny jeans. The one with wavy brown hair said something, and the other one, taller with curly sun-streaked hair, laughed. Dahlia was wearing a faded T-shirt that her grandfather had given her that said cutie pie, like, Greek letter pie, and old cut-off jean shorts. Her stomach turned again. 3 weeks was a long time to spend living with other kids her own age. 7th grade was bad enough, but at least she could go home in the afternoon and hang out with other magicians online. At home, she didn't have anyone checking if she was wearing the right pajamas to bed or something. She bet she'd be the only one in her bunk who even wore glasses. I changed my mind, she said abruptly, hating the quiver in her voice. I don't want to stay here. Forget our deal. Dahlia. Her mother had a bit of a quiver in her own voice. You cannot spend the summer practicing magic tricks and playing Guitar Hero. The Wii is good exercise. Only compared to sleeping, her father said. Her mother spoke before Dahlia could answer. Honey, we really believe you'll have a good time. Well, I don't. You know the deal, her mother said. Try it out for 1 week. Tom has promised to get you to a phone next Sunday. If you want to come home then, fine. If you let me bring my cell, Tom won't have to. Dahlia let her voice trail off. Something was shimmering in front of the cabin. It was like the heat shimmer you see on a very hot day at the beach, or when you're looking past a hot stove. But it wasn't that hot out. And she squinted, blinked, and squinted again. It wasn't just a shimmer. There was a person there. 2 people, little girls. Campers aren't allowed to bring cell phones, her father said. They detract from the sense of community they're trying to build here. Dahlia said distractedly. She blinked again. Yeah, definitely 2 little girls. It was hard to make out the details through the shimmer. One looked to be about 10 and the other even younger, probably dropping off their big sister at camp. Dahlia opened the car door and stepped out. What was making that shimmer? The older of the girls seemed to notice Dahlia looking at them, and she grabbed the other girl's hand. She took a step away from Dahlia toward the cabin, dragging the smaller girl with her. Then another step, then another, straight through the cabin's wall. So, oh, thank you. At this point, I usually now turn to the audience and say, what do you think happened next? Why do you think the girls could walk the wall? And honestly, 10-year-olds are great. Like, they almost always know. They're ghosts. They're hallucinations. She's tired. She's seeing things. So, I don't know. Was it 20 minutes including question and answer?
Excluding.
Excluding. Oh, plenty of time. Okay, this is easy. So I'm going to read now a story. This is a story for grown-ups. I've published about 20 short stories, and I chose this one because there's a nice little, very short bit to take out of it. So we'll have plenty of time to chat. So this is published in a magazine called Greatest Uncommon Denominator. And the name of the story is 4 Short Parables Revolving Around the Theme of Travel. And I'm going to read you the second parable called Tourists. When the aliens came, they looked like game show hosts. Let me start again. I'm not going to sit there after all. All right. When the aliens came, they looked like game show hosts. They looked like camp counselors. They looked like game show hosting camp counselors. They wore expensive suits with sandals and had long straight hair that would have been fashionable in exactly 1973. It turned out that 1973 was the last year of television that had made it to their distant planet before they decided to visit Earth. Upon arriving, they spent days in Manhattan's Museum of Radio and Television, catching up on the last 23 years of television, as well as watching old favorites. There were 3 aliens, and each of them thought Jack Ritter was the funniest human on Earth. They claimed to have tests that could prove this empirically. Not everyone liked the aliens. They were widely believed to be liars as well as aliens. They claimed to be genderless, but they all looked like men and had sex only with human females. They claimed to be kings. They claimed to be wise. They gave gifts that people didn't always like. For instance, they gave almost everyone they met very small quantities of gold and frankincense and myrrh, along with their favorite recipes for using them. They accosted people on the sidewalks or even in their cars. They would ask questions in their deep baritone voices. Their favorite 3 questions were, if you could go to a desert island, what 3 types of food would you bring with you? What celebrity would you bring with you? What 5 albums would you have with you? On several occasions, they then put the person in question on the desert island with the food, celebrity, and albums of their choice. Poor celebrities, some people, mostly Us magazine readers, said. Poor desert island ecosystems, fewer people, mostly Sierra Club members, said. A few religious people said that the aliens had come for the birth of the Messiah who would redeem all of humanity. These people said that our sun was one of 3 stars that they were following to see the Messiah born. But the aliens never said anything about that, and after about 3 months and a final weekend in Las Vegas, they left, never to be seen on Earth again. Thank you. So I could read more, but I feel like that's a good stopping point. Why don't we do questions and answers?
Thank you, Ari. Questions?
Oh, thank you. The Path of Names you can get at Chapters and Kids Books on Broadway. Pretty much any bookstore will have it, or Amazon. Apparently Amazon has lots of things you can buy, although not maybe as much as Amazon.com.
Do you have a question?
Why does Dahlia not want to go to, why does Dahlia not like that cat so much, though?
Well, she had a scary experience there when she visited her brother, and so that's she's.
Why did you think it was so close? It was a really, really sunny day.
On a really sunny day, that's a great question. You know the answer to that, the people who haven't read the book. Okay, well, I'll tell you that. I obviously have to read my book to my daughter, who asks great questions, but Ellie, I don't want to give it away, okay? Because that's sort of a secret in the book.
Yes.
Thanks.
I think a lot of us in the room write research and write business writing for our work.
Yeah.
What's the difference between sitting and doing creative writing? Is there a difference when you're just going to draw from your imagination and finding words to describe that, or not really? It's just a process of sitting at a desk and getting it done?
That's a great question. And I guess there are similarities and differences. So similarities that I would say is in both cases, the biggest hurdle, the hardest and most fun part is just, you have a blank page and you start writing. And that's true of academic writing, as you all know. For me anyway, when I'm writing a paper for academia, I'm still sitting down and have to just start somewhere. And that first starting is often ugly and that's true of my creative writing too, is still sitting down. The difference for me is very much in the process. Like for academic writing, I will usually have an outline. I will usually have a pretty good idea of what I want to say. I still have to say it, but I will outline it. I'll have key points that I want to hit. I'll know what my conclusions are more or less before I start, most of the time. It's different earlier in a research project where you might be discovering stuff, but typically I think that's true. I'm basically working from an outline. In creative writing, I find if I have an outline, if I outline things, especially a novel, which is pretty long, even middle grade or young adult novels, if I have too good of an outline, I won't finish it because I get bored. If I know exactly where I'm going, I'll write the first few chapters and I'll be like, oh, whatever, I know what's going to happen. So it's really important for my creative writing to keep it loose as I go because I want to sort of discover it as I write it, so I stay interested.
Yes. Ari, great talk. Congratulations.
Oh, thank you, Tom. Great to see you.
You've proven you can live in two different worlds. I'm interested in kind of the procedural experiential challenge, if that's what it is, when you do different kinds of writing. Could you do them both on the same day, perhaps, like a bit of one after the other? Does there have to be a temporal separation?
That
Which
is,
of those acts?
for me, there really does. I mean, one of the beauties of the career niche I have now is I'm teaching statistics and business math, things which are very numerical and very, so I can write on the same day that I'm teaching, no problem. However, when I'm writing academically and writing creatively, that's both kind of creative processes. Like, academic writing is still creative, at least I think it is. So for me, it very much is using the same brain cells. I can do it on the same day, but I can't do much of it on it. Like if I do a lot of one, I'm sort of burnt out and can't do the other.
Yeah, 'cause I'm just wondering if there's any kind of link between the two. I mean, does one help the other in a sense? If you have a good day creative writing, does this kind of get the synapses going? You think this might be a good day to also think about some academic writing as well, or are they so differentiated in terms of the kinds of cognitive processes and that processes that you want some clear separation?
On the contrary, I think they aren't so separated cognitively, and so, but it's sort of like a battery. You have so much to expend on it, and so I find that if I have been spending the day writing, if I've got a good productive day of either kind of writing, it's really sort of a one-shot deal for that day. Like I can get out a couple chapters of one or the other, but not both. I suppose, I've never tried this, but I suppose if I did a little bit of one, I could do a little bit of the other, but that somehow, it just never, yeah, exactly.
Everybody's busy. Yeah.
Right.
That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Good question.
Jeffrey had a question.
What made you to decide to write for a middle grade audience, and what sort of challenges did you find, or did you have any challenges sort of getting into the mindset of that 10 to 13-year-old?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I thought I was writing a young adult novel, and my agent thought it was a young adult novel. We agreed it was young adult, and then she sent it to the editor. The person who purchased this is Scholastic, Arthur Levine, an imprint of Scholastic. The editor is this woman, Cheryl Klein, very bright. She edited Harry Potter. I mean, she's a big name. And she was like, yeah, I like this a lot, but would you be willing to age it down to make Dahlia age 13? Because I think it really works better for middle grade. And what's so uncanny about that is I initially had Dahlia at age 13, really, exactly 13, exactly the number that came out of her mouth. But I had been told by, conventional wisdom in young adult is you need older protagonists because kids want to read slightly older than they are. So I'd made her 15 or 16, and Cheryl read it and was immediately like, no, she should be 13. So, yeah, that's how it came. As for getting in their mindset, I guess I start by remembering what I was like then. I spent a lot of time working with kids when I was younger, too. So from the ages of 18 to 23 or so, I taught part-time, and I worked at summer camps during the summer. And so I had a lot of time with that particular age group to sort of draw on when I started writing.
As you were speaking about this just a bit before, you have these two very different kind of branches of life. I'm sure both involve a lot of effort and motivation. And a lot of us struggle with kind of using our main skill set and trying to do the thing that we're supposed to be doing, and having other things we're passionate about, and not really having the energy or the motivation to take away from your main thing and build this other. Do you have any sort of insight into how you kind of did this successfully, or how you make it work?
Yeah, that's definitely difficult. I guess for me, I was working full-time as a researcher, and it wasn't that interesting to me, the research I was doing. I was working actually at BCIT for a while in a very particular kind of, and I was wasting a lot of time every day. I was going in from 9 to 5, and a lot of that time was sort of wasted. And so I realized that if I could do something more concentrated, and so I moved to teaching at Kwantlen Polytechnic, and the teaching is full on, and it's, I like it, it's fun, but then I'm done. You do it, you're done. And so I could carve out a space, which was just sort of to speak to Tom's question as well, I could carve out a space which was just writing. So I think it's really hard to do both, and switching between the two, you just have to be very conscious of. So say, okay, this is, now I'm, now I'm working on class, I'm not writing now, and then now I'm writing. And just, it does, especially since having kids. I have 3 young, this is my big girl, and then I have 2 twins. And that, there's only 24 hours in a day, and you just kind of have to make peace with that. Which, it's all, so as long as it's all sort of appeals to some part of you, then I think the two can sort of energize each other, because you're doing one thing and then you're doing something totally different, but as long as it's all, as long as you're into it all, it doesn't feel like too much.
Yes.
Ari, I read Ari's book, and I was reading it because I know Ari, but I was imagining this for a little kid. And actually, I couldn't put it down. It was really good. So it was creepy, and I'd get to bed at night and I'd have to keep reading. So I'm going to endorse Ari's book there, and he can tell me later.
Nikki's just saying that because she made me do this, so it's...
But I was also wondering if you had the finances to stop teaching, would you want to work full time with just writing, or is there something that doing the academic part makes the writing still seem like a pleasure and a hobby? Interesting.
That is so far from my current reality that it's... I really like teaching. I'll tell you what I would miss about teaching if I did stop. I mean, it would be a trade-off if writing became more lucrative. I could imagine doing that, but what I would miss about teaching is the face-to-face and the interactions. I really enjoy the feedback I get from my students. I'm fortunate in teaching at a place where I have a maximum of 35 students in a section. So by the first week or two, I know everyone's name, and it's so I would definitely think about that, but I would certainly miss parts of teaching as well.
Any other questions for Ari? Yes.
So I, living here at Penn College, lots of friends who do writing say that their first work is usually autobiographical. So I was wondering if you've ever done anything that was autobiographical.
I think that's probably more true of literary writers. I write fantasy and science fiction primarily. I did take a class at NYU many years ago before I was at Green College. I took a creative writing class, and it was very much that sort of autobiographical. And I got really bored with my own story. And I realized I actually made, after spending 4 months working on the story about, a character very easily, to me anyway, identified with myself, for some reason that felt very restraining to me. And then I was like, you know what I really want to write about? Why don't I write someone with a sword? And I moved past the sword stuff soon after that, but it was, it's just what I think, you bring the kind of books you like to read, and I don't read a lot of books about people like me. Some, but more books about other, I'll tell you, this was not your question, but orthogonally, my writing tastes have dramatically changed since I started writing. Not speaking so much, but, and I find I'm more interested in those sorts of stories now than I used to be. I appreciate the craft in them in a way that I not used to.
Any further questions? All right, thank you, Ari.
Thank you.
I believe we'll have a minute or two set up.